Saint Augustine on the Most Holy Trinity, Book 15, Chapter 6. Content of Chapter 6. How there is a Trinity in the very simplicity of God, whether and how the Trinity that is God is manifested from the Trinities which have been shown to be in man. When then we say eternal, wise, blessed, are these three the Trinity that is called God? We reduce indeed those 12 to this small number of three, but perhaps we can go further and reduce these three also to one of them. For if wisdom and might, or life and wisdom, can be one and the same thing in the nature of God, why can't eternity and wisdom, or blessedness and wisdom, be one and the same thing in the nature of God? And hence, as it made no difference whether we spoke of these 12 or of those three when we reduced the many to the small number, so does it make no difference whether we speak of those three or of that one to the singularity of which we have shown that the other two of the three may be reduced. What fashion then of argument, what possible force and might of understanding, what liveliness of reason, what sharp-sightedness of thought will set forth how, to pass over now the others, this one thing, that God is called wisdom, is a Trinity? For God does not receive wisdom from anyone as we receive it from him, but he is himself his own wisdom, because his wisdom is not one thing, and his essence another, seeing that to him to be wise is to be. Christ indeed is called in the Holy Scriptures the power of God and the wisdom of God. 1 Corinthians 1:24. But we have discussed in the 7th book how this is to be understood, so that the Son may not seem to make the Father wise, and our explanation came to this, that the Son is wisdom of wisdom, in the same way as he is light of light, God of God. Nor could we find the Holy Spirit to be in any other way than that he himself also is wisdom, and altogether one wisdom as one God, one essence. How then do we understand this wisdom which is God to be a Trinity? I do not say, how do we believe this? For among the faithful this ought to admit no question. But supposing there is any way by which we can see with the understanding what we believe, what is that way? For if we recall where it was in these books that the Trinity first began to show itself to our understanding, the 8th book is that which occurs to us, since it was there that, to the best of our power, we try to raise the aim of the mind to understand that most excellent and unchangeable nature, which our mind is not. And we so contemplated this nature as to think of it as not far from us, and as above us, not in place, but by its own awful and wonderful excellence, and in such wise that it appeared to be with us by its own present light. Yet in this no Trinity was yet manifest to us, because in that blaze of light we did not keep the eye of the mind steadfastly bent upon seeking it, only we discerned it in a sense because there was no bulk, wherein we must needs think the magnitude of 2 or 3 to be more than that of 1. But when we came to treat of love, which in the Holy Scriptures is called God, 1 John chapter 4 verse 16, then a Trinity began to dawn upon us a little, i.e., one that loves and that which is loved and love. but because that ineffable light beat back our gaze, and it became in some degree plain that the weakness of our mind could not as yet be tempered to it, we turned back in the midst of the course we had begun, and planned according to the, as it were, more familiar consideration of our own mind, according to which man is made after the image of God. Genesis 1:27. In order to relieve our overstrained attention, and thereupon we dwelt from the 9th to the 14th book upon the consideration of the creature which we are, that we might be able to understand and behold the invisible things of God by those things which are made. And now that we have exercised the understanding as far as was needful, or perhaps more than was needful, in lower things, lo, we wish, but have not strength to raise ourselves to behold that highest Trinity which is God. For in such manner as we see most undoubted trinities, whether those which are wrought from without by corporeal things, or when these same things are thought of which we were perceived from without, or when those things which take their rise in the mind and do not pertain to the senses of the body, as faith, or as the virtues which comprise the art of living, are discerned by manifest reason and held fast by knowledge, or when the mind itself, by which we know whatever we truly say that we know, is known to itself or thinks of itself, or when that mind beholds anything eternal and unchangeable, which itself is not. In such way, then, I say, as we see in all these instances most undoubted trinities, because they are wrought in ourselves or are in ourselves, when we remember, look at, or desire these things. Do we, I say, in such manner also see the Trinity that is God, because there also by the understanding we behold both him as it were speaking and his word, i.e. the Father and the Son, and then proceeding thence the love common to both, namely the Holy Spirit? These trinities that pertain to our senses or to our mind, do we rather see than believe them, but rather believe than see that God is a Trinity? But if this is so, then doubtless we either do not at all understand and behold the invisible things of God by those things that are made, or if we behold them at all, we do not behold the Trinity in them. And there is therein somewhat to behold, and somewhat also which we ought to believe, even though not beheld. And as the 8th book showed that we behold the unchangeable good which we are not, so the 14th reminded us thereof when we spoke of the wisdom that man has from God. Why then do we not recognize the Trinity therein? Does that wisdom which God is said to be not perceive itself and not love itself? Who would say this? Or who is there that does not see that where there is no knowledge, there in no way is there wisdom? Or are we in truth to think that the wisdom which is God knows other things, and does not know itself, or loves other things and does not love itself? But if this is a foolish and impious thing to say or believe, then behold, we have a Trinity, to wit, wisdom and the knowledge wisdom has of itself, and its love of itself. For so too we find a Trinity in man also, i.e. mind, and the knowledge wherewith mind knows itself, and the love wherewith it loves itself. Chapter 7. That it is not easy to discover the Trinity that is God from the Trinities we have spoken of. But these three are in such way in man that they are not themselves man. For man, as the ancients defined him, is a rational mortal animal. These things, therefore, are the chief things in man, but are not man themselves. And any one person, i.e., each individual man, has these three things in his mind. But if again we were so to define man as to say, man is a rational substance consisting of mind and body, then without doubt man has a soul that is not body, and a body that is not soul. And hence these three things are not man, but belong to man, or are in man. If again we put aside the body and think of the soul by itself, the mind is somewhat belonging to the soul, as though its head or eye or countenance, that these things are not to be regarded as bodies. It is not then the soul, but that which is chief in the soul, that is called the mind. But can we say that the Trinity is in such way in God as to be somewhat belonging to God and not itself God? And hence each individual man who is called the image of God, not according to all things that pertain to his nature, but according to his mind alone, is one person, and is an image of the Trinity in his mind. But that Trinity of which he is the image is nothing else in its totality than God, is nothing else in its totality than the Trinity. Nor does anything pertain to the nature of God, so as not to pertain to that Trinity, and the three persons are of one essence, not as each individual man is one person. There is again a wide difference in this point likewise, that whether we speak of the mind in a man, and of its knowledge and love, or of memory, understanding, will, we remember nothing of the mind except by memory, nor understand anything except by understanding, nor love anything except by will. But in that Trinity, who would dare to say that the Father understands neither himself, nor the Son, nor the Holy Spirit except by the Son, or loves them except by the Holy Spirit, and that he remembers only by himself, either himself or the Son or the Holy Spirit, and in the same way that the Son remembers neither himself nor the Father, except by the Father, nor loves them except by the Holy Spirit, but that by himself he only understands both the Father and Son and Holy Spirit. And in like manner that the Holy Spirit by the Father remembers both the Father and the Son and himself, and by the Son understands both the Father and the Son and himself. But by himself only loves both himself and the Father and the Son, as though the Father were both his own memory, and that of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and the Son were the understanding of both himself and the Father and the Holy Spirit. But the Holy Spirit were the love both of himself and of the Father and of the Son. Who would presume to think or affirm this of that Trinity? For if therein the Son alone understands both for himself and for the Father and for the Holy Spirit, we have returned to the old absurdity that the Father is not wise from himself, but from the Son, and that wisdom has not begotten wisdom, but that the Father is said to be wise by that wisdom which he begat. For where there is no understanding, there can be no wisdom. And hence, if the Father does not understand himself for himself, but the Son understands for the Father, assuredly the Son makes the Father wise. But if to God to be is to be wise, and essence is to him the same as wisdom, then it is not the Son that has his essence from the Father, which is the truth, but rather the Father from the Son, which is a most absurd falsehood. And this absurdity beyond all doubt we have discussed, disproved, and rejected in the 7th book. Therefore God the Father is wise by that wisdom by which he is his own wisdom, and the Son is the wisdom of the Father, from the wisdom which is the Father, from whom the Son is begotten. Whence it follows that the Father understands also by that understanding by which is his own understanding, for he could not be wise that did not understand, and that the Son is the understanding of the Father, begotten of the understanding which is the Father. And this same may not be unfitly said of memory also. For how is the wise that remembers nothing, or does not remember himself? Accordingly, since the Father is wisdom, and the Son is wisdom, therefore as the Father remembers himself, so does the Son also remember himself. And as the Father remembers both himself and the Son, not by the memory of the Son, but by his own, so does the Son remember both himself and the Father, not by the memory of the Father, but by his own. Where again there is no love, who would say there was any wisdom? And hence we must infer that the Father is in such way his own love, as is his own understanding and memory. And therefore, these three, i.e., memory, understanding, love or will, in that highest and unchangeable essence which is God, are, we see, not the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, but the Father alone. And because the Son too is wisdom, begotten of wisdom, as neither the Father nor the Holy Spirit understands for him, but he understands for himself, so neither does the Father remember for him, nor the Holy Spirit love for him, but he remembers and loves for himself. For he is himself also his own memory, his own understanding, and his own love. But that he is so comes to him from the Father, of whom he is born, and because the Holy Spirit also is wisdom proceeding from wisdom, he too has not the Father for a memory, and the Son for an understanding, and himself for love, for he would not be wisdom if another remembered for him, and yet another understood for him, and he only loved for himself. But himself has all three things, and has them in such way that they are himself. But that he so comes to him thence whence he proceeds. What man, then, is there who can comprehend that wisdom by which God knows all things, in such wise that neither what we call things past are past therein, nor what we call things future are therein waited for as coming, as though they were absent, but both past and future with things present are all present. Nor yet are things thought severely, so that thought passes from one to another, but all things simultaneously are at hand in one glance. What man, I say, is there that comprehends that wisdom, and the like prudence and the like knowledge, since in truth even our own wisdom is beyond our comprehension. For somehow we are able to behold the things that are present to our senses or to our understanding, but the things that are absent and yet have once been present, we know by memory, if we have not forgotten them. And we conjecture too not the past from the future, but the future from the past, yet by all unstable knowledge. For they are some of our thoughts to which on the future we, as it were, look onward with greater plainness and certainty as being very near, and we do this by the means of memory when we are able to do it, as much as we ever are able, although memory seems to belong not to the future but to the past. And this may be tried in the case of any words or songs, the due order of which we are rendering by memory. For we certainly should not utter each in succession, unless we foresaw in thought what came next. And yet it is not foresight but memory that enables us to foresee it, for up to the very end of the words or the song, nothing is uttered except as foreseen and looked forward to. And yet in doing this we are not said to speak or sing by foresight but by memory, and if anyone is more than commonly capable of uttering many pieces in this way, he is usually praised not for his foresight but for his memory. We know and are absolutely certain that all this takes place in our mind or by our mind, but how it takes place, the more attentively we desire to scrutinize, the more do both our very words break down and our purpose itself fails, when by our understanding, if not our tongue, we would reach to something of clearness. And do such as we are think that in so great infirmity of mind we can comprehend whether the foresight of God is the same as his memory and his understanding. What does not regard in thought each several thing, but embraces all that he knows in one eternal and unchangeable and ineffable vision? In this difficulty then and strait we may well cry out to the living God, such knowledge is too wonderful for me, it is high, I can't attain unto it. Psalm 139, verse 6. For I understand myself, how wonderful and incomprehensible is thy knowledge, by which thou madest me, when I can't even comprehend myself, whom thou hast made. And yet, while I was musing, the fire burnt. Psalm 39, verse 3. So that I seek thy face evermore. Psalm 105, verse 4.